Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Now earlier this very month, Bryan Singer made a surprise announcement that Fox had already greenlighted the next installment of the X-Men franchise that he would helm, and it would feature Apocalypse. And I think we all ended up feeling pretty good about this announcement because of its timing. It was months in advance of the release of Days of Future Past instead of just days before. Because as I've said, a popular Hollywood PR trick is right before a movie is released to announce that you're already working on the sequel or the next installment to make audiences feel that this train is already leaving the station and picking up speed, and if you don't jump on, you're going to be hopelessly lost or out of the loop. But because this was announced so early, I think it seemed more like a sign of Fox's faith in this newly rejuvenated franchise back under Singer's leadership. However, he couldn't just leave well enough alone. Now, a whole other discussion is whether or not Bryan Singer is addicted to Twitter and the negative effects it could be having on his career. But this week, he continued to tweet about Apocalypse, and he, for instance, tweeted a photo of him and his writers sitting around in a room, and he said, #X-Men, #Apocalypse, late night story session, and then later tweeted, "It's snowing in Egypt." Now, I think it's great that Singer is so enthusiastic about this Apocalypse film, and I think a lot of people will be happy to hear the Egypt reference because, wondering if Hollywood would have that kind of faith in mainstream audiences to, go into that ancient Egyptian history of the character. And it looks like they're doing that. But if Bryan Singer, I'm starting to feel, if Bryan Singer has already moved on past Days of Future Past onto this Apocalypse film, maybe I should move on too. Now, I think that is an unintended effect, obviously, for Bryan Singer. I think where he's coming from is not just this enthusiasm, but the fact that Warner Brothers DC and Marvel really telegraph and publicly share their plans for their cinematic universes. For instance, we all know what's going to happen in Avengers Phase 2 or the Marvel Phase 2. And we even have some ideas of what's going to happen in Phase 3. Kevin Feige fuels that speculation by himself, musing about what he'd like to see in Phase 3. So I think Singer's just trying to do the same. But what he doesn't seem to realize is he is not the Kevin Feige of Fox. That job belongs to Mark Millar, or Mark Millar, however you want to say it. I'm going to go with Millar because people tried to go to Millar and everyone said, no, go back to Millar. And I was like, what are you guys talking about? Make up your mind. So I'm just going to stick with Millar. So Mark Millar has been hired to run all the Marvel properties at Fox. So if he wants to tweet about Apocalypse, tweet away. But with Singer, the problem is that Singer isn't just overseeing all of this, but he's supposed to be directly involved in wrapping up Days of Future Past. He should be in the editing room, putting that together. Now, I realize there's a timetable they have to adhere to, and they don't want to wait too long to get this Apocalypse movie out. But I think share the initial announcement. You're going to work on it. That's great. But I think then redirect the excitement back to Days of Future Past by continuing to focus on Apocalypse. Unless Apocalypse is going to show up at the end of Days of Future Past, I think, and even so, we're not going to know that going in. I think it's important to keep the focus and the excitement that Singer has on Days of Future Past. I don't want to feel like that's already an old toy, because who wants Bryan Singer's old toys? So what do you guys think? Do you think this is an unintended effect of his tweeting about Apocalypse, or do you not care? You just want all the X-Men news, movie news you can get. All right, so that's the first story of the day. The second story of the day is that it looks like Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise are going to re-team decades later after Interview with a Vampire, which is very interesting because the stories at the time of Interview with a Vampire was that they really did not get along on set, largely because Tom Cruise felt that Brad Pitt was a threat. Brad Pitt was new at the time to Hollywood. He felt that Brad Pitt was a threat to his own heartthrobness. So there was a lot of awkwardness and tension, and it basically just wasn't a fun set to be on. But as we all know now, it turned out great for both of them. Actually, Brad Pitt has just turned 50 this week, and Tom Cruise is 51, and they're both considered heartthrobs. Hollywood's big enough for many heartthrobs, guys. Maybe they both go and gang up on Ryan Gosling and play pranks on him. But I think that they're obviously buried the hatchet, and they might be teaming up on a new movie, which is called Go Like Hell, which is Hollywood's answer to Rush. Ron Howard must be so ticked off because Hollywood wouldn't make Rush. He had to make it mostly as an independent film through Europe. But as obviously Rush has done pretty well. Not so much at the box office. It did pretty good overseas, but the box office here is pitiful. But it's doing very well with awards nominations. It got SAG nominations, Golden Globe nominations, and hopefully we'll see that continue on to the Oscars. So Hollywood's never seen an idea they haven't wanted to copy, and that's a nice way to say it. So they are fast-tracking this Go Like Hell film because both Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt would really like an Oscar as well. And so they're like, hey, I see an Oscar opportunity. Let's get it before Leonardo DiCaprio does. So the story they're going to tell is also a racing story. And instead of the rivalry between Niki Lauda and James Hunt, drivers, this is going to be a competition between the car makers themselves, Ford and Ferrari. So they're getting that American angle in there, hopefully to engage American audiences. Now this took place in the 1960s, about a decade before the Hunt-Lauda feud. Or competition, friendly competition as we saw from the film. So that'll be interesting to see kind of what was happening right before that. So they don't have to worry about crossover. We don't have to worry is someone else going to play Niki Lauda after Daniel Bruhl's brilliant performance. But you're going to have, basically, Tom Cruise will be on the American Ford side, which is good, since after Valkyrie, where he's like, I'm just going to do an American accent even though I'm playing a German, because you know what? It's less embarrassing than trying the German accent. And there's no word yet who Pitt will play, but he was attached to the film back when Michael Mann was going to direct. So who's directing now? Tom Cruise is reteaming with Joseph Kosinski, his Oblivion director and the Tron Legacy guy, for this film as well. And you know, Joseph Kosinski is a really good design guy, so this might be a good film for him. You know, the 60s Mad Men feel in the cars. That might be a good match for him. I haven't been too happy with Kosinski's work, quite frankly, but it's done okay at the box office, and a lot of people, you know, some people didn't, but a lot of people did enjoy Oblivion. So I can see it makes sense for them to team up. But this is great for both actors, and so I'm curious what you guys think. Do you want to see a Cruise-Pitt team up? And do you think this is the right property? And do you think this is a little insulting to Rush and what Ron Howard did? And can Kosinski possibly do as good a job as Ron Howard did? The action scenes in that film, as I said when it came out, were just phenomenal. And the film was directed like a new independent director, not someone who had decades of mainstream Hollywood experience. It was really a lean, mean movie machine, just like the lean, mean racing machines featured on screen. So that's the second story of the day. The third story of the day is Despicable Me 2 is doing quite well on, on video and on streaming. And I wanted to bring this up because we've been discussing how the revenue from, both hard copies being sold and downloaded copies has really dried up. And that's really hurt the smaller films coming out of Hollywood because there isn't that extra revenue source to help fund them. But it looks like occasionally people are still willing to shell out the money to purchase a film. And one of those films is Despicable Me 2. Now, it made $80 million its first week. Not as much as some video games, but still, that's extremely impressive, and it only adds even more money to the haul of the films. I think they're about $1.5 billion in total, but most of that money comes from Despicable Me 2. Despicable Me 2, worldwide at the box office, in theaters, is close to $1 billion. And I believe the only film to cross the $1 billion mark is Toy Story 3 of an animated film. So that's just phenomenal news. That is just shows the strength of the Despicable Me franchise. When Universal has admitted their most profitable film ever, and it continues to do so. So I think that's interesting. I'm wondering, what's the line that you've currently drawn for when you're willing to actually purchase a film now that they're so readily available? It used to be like, hey, who knows? I might want to watch this movie at any time. I want that opportunity. But now that you can always get things streaming them from Amazon or Netflix or just iTunes, people feel I don't need to reserve and hold on to that film and purchase it because for a lesser price I can just rent it or stream it when I want to. So I'm curious, what makes you want to buy a movie these days? And did you buy Despicable Me 2? Did you contribute to that $80 million? All right, so those are the three stories of the day. The viewer question comes from A5H107. And it says, Grace, what do you think of the Shia LaBeouf situation? I'm glad you brought this up, A5. That's going to be my nickname for you, A5, because I have to say, really, he's really Shia LaDouche at this point. I mean, any credibility this guy had left, and it was really just a very small strand, has been obliterated by what he's done. Now, for those of you who haven't heard, Shia LaBeouf is, trying to remake himself as an artist, kind of like Joseph Gordon-Levitt. He's like, I can do that too. This guy doesn't have an original thought in his head, which I'm about to prove even further. Or he proved it, which I'm about to illustrate. So he's like, I'm going to make a movie. Besides going around and getting naked and running around having my head digitally imposed, that's the story, on a porn actor's body in Nymphomaniac from Lars von Trier, I'm also going to go and make a short film. So he makes this short film. It's called, it's called HowardCantor.com, and it stars Jim Gaffigan, and it actually starts to make the festival circuit and get some praise. People are like, you know what, LaBeouf? Maybe you are a good filmmaker. Maybe you are an artiste. Good for you. But then he goes and makes the fatal mistake of releasing it online. And immediately, people begin to notice from the comic book community that he has ripped off Daniel Close's 2007 graphic novella, Justin M. Damiano. And a firestorm just, erupts of people going, you've plagiarized. Literally, panels and words, almost as if Daniel Clowes wrote him the storyboards for his short film. And so LaBeouf kind of disappears for a little bit, shuts down the website and isn't tweeting, and then finally reemerges and says, hey, I messed up. I should have credited Daniel Clowes, my mistake. But I think what he was really saying was, wow, damn it, I totally underestimated how many people read comic books. So I think two things are amazing here. One, the lack of respect that LaBeouf has for the comic book community, that he felt he could get away with this. And two, how few people actually read comic books in the entertainment industry. This was able to go around the entire festival circuit. No one was for the wiser that it was a ripoff. And then almost immediately when it goes online, it's recognized for being a ripoff of this this graphic novella. So I think, LaBeouf, I think, he can just go retire and find something else to do. I have no idea. Jennifer Lawrence, be careful. This is what can potentially come of just letting yourself say anything that you want, not having a filter. It seems cool at first, but then it starts to go horribly off the rails and you can't get back on. So that, I don't want that. Jennifer Lawrence has a lot of fans. I don't think any of us want that to be her future, but I feel like the Ghost of Christmas, Christmas Carol, be careful. This could be where you end up. So that's what happened to LaBeouf. I think it's horrible. As I've said before on this show, I think that creative content, what you come up with, your creative process is invaluable. I think that to take that and to steal that is, someone's creation is one of the worst things you can do. That's currency in Hollywood, ideas, and it's really a despicable thing to do. So I'm appalled, but I was appalled with LaBeouf before. Ever since he said in an interview that his mom was hot and that if she wasn't his mom, he'd totally sleep with her, I was like, that's it, I'm done. And I was a fan of you, Shia, but you just creep me out way too much. And he is just a creep. He's just a creep. He's a slime ball, and I think that anyone who rips anybody off, plagiarizes, has major problems. I'm shocked that Fareed Zakaria plagiarized another journalist, and he still works for Newsweek and CNN. It's just, I think when you plagiarize someone, that should be it. You should be done, because it's just such a horrible thing to do. Do you guys agree with me? Do you feel as strongly about plagiarism as I do? Or do you think, hey, you know what? He apologized. Daniel Clowes is getting a lot of publicity. Slight harm. Let's not call it a foul. Write your thoughts down below. Thank you for tuning in. You can write down below what you think of today's 3 stories and the viewer question. And Morning Movie News will be on Monday, so let me know what stories you'd like to see covered and any questions you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.